All right, we're going to use a microphone just because we're recording this, so for the purposes of people that want to watch it later. My name is Terry Caldwell, and I am one of the high school counselors here, so thank you so much for attending. This is Cassidy Brown, and Cassidy is a financial aid advisor at SUNY Brockport. In her role, she supports students and their families through every step of the financial aid process. She provides guidance on completing the FAFSA and New York State TAP applications while exploring options for students to make college more affordable. Her goal is to make the process a little easier and less overwhelming. So, welcome, Cassidy.
Thank you all for being here this evening. So today I'm going to be kind of going over what the definition of financial aid is, what a cost of attendance is, as well as the student aid index. So I know these can be a lot of new terms. With that being said, how many seniors do we have in the audience? Or do we have all seniors? Any juniors? Awesome, okay. So specifically for this upcoming academic year, for the 26-27 year, I'll be speaking directly to the seniors because that's the application that you will be applying to. For our juniors, it will be the 27-28 year. So a lot can change in a year. So you just want to make sure that you keep on getting updated as things might change. Some other things I will also be going through are the categories and different types of financial aid, as well as major financial aid programs, including the free application for federal aid, also known as the FAFSA, New York State TAP and the Excelsior Scholarship, if you plan on attending a New York State school or a college within New York State, as well as going over what to do when a special circumstance occurs. So the goal of financial aid is to assist students in paying for their educational investment, and that's achieved by evaluating the family's ability to pay for educational costs, distributing limited resources in an equitable manner, and attempting to provide a balance of gift and self-help aid. So each college or university that you go to, you'll have what's called a cost of attendance. And this is what's involved in the cost of attendance. First of all, the major ones, tuition and fees, books and supplies, as well as transportation, housing and food, as well as miscellaneous personal expenses. Those miscellaneous personal expenses are things to think about is when your student is on a college campus, what kind of money are they going to need to get their daily needs fulfilled? What is the student aid index? So it is defined as the number resulting from the evaluation of a student's and family's approximate financial resources for a student's post-secondary education. So essentially it is the federal formula that they use to figure out what financial aid can be awarded. And this is broken down by the student contribution. So the student does report their finances on the FAFSA, as well as that parent contribution for our dependent students. So with the financial need analysis, it is your cost of attendance minus that student aid index, and that's going to equal your financial need. So something to keep in mind is that your financial need is going to look different between institutions. Is that you might apply to a school that costs more per year, so your financial need is going to be more per year. Whereas a state school like SUNY Brockport, it might be a little less because the state tuition is only that $7,070. So your financial need will significantly, most likely be less at a school that costs less to go to per year. So there's two different categories of financial aid, that is need-based aid and non-need-based aid. So to break down the different types of financial aid, you have your free money, which is your gift aid, your scholarships, and your grants, as well as your self-help aid, which belongs that is money that you'll have to pay back, as well as work study employment. Now, I'll go through each individual one to kind of break down a little bit further. The first we have is the scholarships. So these are the ones that you can apply to in several different places. First one, you can reach out to the school that you're applying to see what they offer. The second one, ask your high school guidance counselor. They might know of some resources at your high school of where you can apply through different programs. Any community organizations that you're a part of, churches, places of employment. You could always ask your employers if they do offer scholarships for their students. Or even parents' places of employment, say if the parents are part of a union, or their employers might offer their children different scholarships. Then you have your grant money. Your grant money is like your federal Pell Grant. That is the grant that is need-based aid based off of what's reported on the FAFSA. And then you have your New York State TAP, which is the New York State Tuition Assistance Program. That is grant money, meaning money you wouldn't have to pay back either. And then you have work study employment. Work study employment is, in a sense, aid that is awarded to a student that is need-based aid. So not every student may qualify for it, but it's reviewed when you submit your FAFSA by your school. A work study employment is an opportunity for you to get a job on your college's campus. Usually, it does not pay directly towards the bill. It is paid to the student directly, like a regular job would, in like a bi-weekly paycheck. And the student can then use that as extra spending money, or if they have to use it to pay towards the bill, essentially out of pocket at that point. Then we have our loans. So for the loans, you will see on the FAFSA, there'll be two different types of loans that you may be awarded. One being the federal subsidized Stafford loan, and the other being the federal unsubsidized Stafford loan. Now the subsidized Stafford loan is need-based aid that will be evaluated when the FAFSA is reviewed. And with that, that does not collect interest while the student is in school. The unsubsidized Stafford loan is not need-based aid. So as a first-year student, the federal regulations, a student can be awarded between the two $5,500 for their first year of those Stafford loans. The unsubsidized Stafford loan does collect interest while the student is in school, but the student can defer that until 6 months after they graduate, stop attending, or drop below 6 credit hours at their college level. Generally speaking, with those interest rates for the federal loans, this year it is a 6.53% interest rate, where it may change. It does usually fluctuate a little bit each year. Generally speaking, it gets released sometime early summertime. Students will get notified of what those loan interest rates will be. Other loans, these loans do not cover your bill, and a lot of the times if you're living on campus at a university, it may not cover. With that being said, other loan options might be you'll see a federal Parent Plus loan. That is a federal loan in the parent's name. It always remains in the parent's name. And more information regarding that can be found on the same website as the FAFSA, which is studentaid.gov. Or you'll also see out there private education loans. Those are the ones that are done through a private bank or lending company. Really big things to look at is most likely students, if they go that route, they will need a cosigner due to age and lack of credit. But things to look at also, interest rates. That's a big thing right now, looking at those interest rates what repayment might look like for the student in the future. And there's some out there where if they have a co-signer for a little while, after 2 years, maybe more of successful payments, that co-signer might be able to be written off of that loan. So really, these are the questions to ask these private loan lenders. We cannot recommend one lender over the other. That is a federal regulation. But really do your research. You could always start with the bank that you currently bank with, or if you type into Google private education loans, a bunch are gonna pop up. Just really, you would wanna look at those. Okay, getting into the FAFSA. So essentially what it's going to do is it's going to take your information and it's going to collect all your demographic and financial information about the student and family. It is highly recommended to file it electronically. You can send in a paper copy, but that will take a very long time to process and can hold up aid if it takes a while to process. It'll be used to calculate the student's SAI, and essentially it'll be sent to the colleges and notify the colleges of the SAI. And it is going to use prior year's taxes, meaning for the 26-27 year, it's going to be looking at your 2024 income. So a unique thing about the FAFSA is that you can list up to 20 schools on it. Remember, when applying to 20 schools, that is 20 schools that you have to keep up with and 20 schools you're going to be getting emails from. So that is something to keep in mind when applying to 20 schools. It will ask some demographic information. That does not get sent to the schools or anything. They just use that on their side to see who's applying through the FAFSA. As well as what is new this past couple of years, it uses the federal taxpayer information and pulls your information directly from the IRS. If anyone has filled out a FAFSA in the past, you know you used to have to sit there with your tax return and fill out line by line. You don't have to do that anymore. You'll have to consent for it to pull your information from the IRS. But first, before you fill out the FAFSA, you'll have to create what's called an FSAID. An FSAID is just your username and password that you will use on the federal website. You will use it for years to come. So if a parent, you attended college and you have student loans out there, you might already have an FSAID. You would have to, if you go and try to make one, if you don't think you have one and it tells you that you already do, you might have to reset your account. It is something more common than not. Students will also need an FSAID. I recommend creating the FSAID and then waiting a couple of days. I say that because essentially what happens when you create your FSAID is that they have to match it with the Social Security Administration. And that allows it to clear through them. And then that'll allow it for easier to get your information pulled directly from the IRS. So, I know I went over this, but students, parents, and students' spouses will need an FSAID. So you're going to have your own. So parents, you cannot share one with your student. The student and the parent have to have separate FSAIDs. And you'll do so on studentaid.gov, where you can go and it'll say create an FSAID. It says it right on the home screen there. You click on that, it'll have you create one. Also going over again is that you must consent to retrieve disclosed federal tax information. If you do not consent to it, the schools that you're applying to will not get an SAI. If they don't get an SAI, they will not be able to process your FAFSA. So in order to receive federal aid, you must consent for it to pull your information directly from the IRS. So this is kind of what the FAFSA website looks right now. It is now open. Has anyone filed it yet? All right, we're ahead of the game. Brockport, we like to see it applied for before January 1st. That is just because we want to make sure there's plenty of time for you to get your award letter and for you to make those decisions. And I know the financial aspect of it is going to be a big part in making those college decisions. So essentially, you'll go on in the past couple of years. I know last year, especially the year before, you saw a lot of fast food news out there. I will say they have cleaned it up quite a bit, so it is a much smoother process this past, I would say, year or so, getting that FAFSA done. Since it's pulling that information directly from the IRS, it's going to seem kind of short. That's okay. That's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be easier for you. So this is where it's going to ask, if you click on apply for the FAFSA, it'll ask you, are you the student or are you the parent? I recommend doing the student side first, so the student will log in with their FSA ID and password. So they will answer their question, and essentially what they will do is they will invite the parent to be a contributor. There'll be a section of the FAFSA where it'll ask you to add parent information, and essentially what it'll do is you'll add your parent's social security number, email. It'll send the parent an email with a link so that they can go in and fill out their part. So for both the student and the parent, it's going to ask you some tax, income, and other financial information. It's going to ask you some federal benefits questions. It's going to ask you about your assets, as well as untaxed income, as well as the parent's marital status. Which leads me to, who is the parent on the FAFSA? So the parent on the FAFSA is a biological parent or adoptive parent. If the parent's not married, but your biological parents live together, you have to report both parents. In that case, both parents will need an FSA ID. If your parent is divorced, you are going to list the parent who provided you the most financial support during the last 12 months. Now, if that biological parent that is divorced has since remarried and you have a step-parent, you must report the step-parent's information as well. And that is regardless of any agreements, meaning I know like for tax purposes, you might, out there, they have agreements with who claims the student on their taxes that year. That is going to be regardless. It's whoever provided the most financial support. Assets that are included on the FAFSA. It'll ask you how much is in your cash, saving, and checking account, as well as it'll ask you about your investments, business, and farm value. It'll ask you regarding your net worth, real estate, but not the home you live in. It is important to remember that. Do not report the home that you live in as real estate. It'll ask you about trust funds, money market, and mutual funds, CDs, stocks, bonds, commodities. It's going to ask you about child support that you received, as well as any educational benefits or savings accounts. And it's important that you include all the accounts. Assets that are not included on the FAFSA: the value of your primary residence, the value of your life insurance, traditional retirement plans, or cash savings and checking that's already reported. You're only going to report the cash savings and checking in that one question where it clearly asks you. A student's dependency status. It asks the students questions regarding their current status. If they answer no to all the questions, some of those questions being, was the student born before January 1st, 2003? Are they a graduate student or a professional student? Are they a veteran? Do they have children or dependents of their own? Things like that would make a student a independent student, meaning they wouldn't need parent information. But most likely, everyone in this room today, they're going to most likely use parent information. It's important to avoid errors. I know it's a short application, but please take your time with it. Because when errors occur, that does hold up the processing of the FAFSA, because sometimes they can take quite a bit of time to get corrected. So really read through it, don't rush through it. And we want to make sure, especially at Brockport, is that you took your time to complete the FAFSA, so making sure that we have all the accurate information so we can award aid correctly. So once you fill out the FAFSA, if you're attending a New York State school, you're going to also want to fill out the New York State TAP application, because that's additional free money that you could be receiving. Generally speaking, I have not seen it yet for this year, but in the past they have put a link at the end of your FAFSA to link you directly to the TAP application. If not, it is the TAP application is done through the New York State website, which is the Higher Education Services Court. So it's hesc.ny.gov. On the TAP application, you can only list one school. With that being said, list your top school, because you'll want to hear from them first regarding your TAP application. It is going to ask you questions directly from your 2024 New York State tax return, which is most likely an IT 201. For the TAP application, I do recommend having your taxes out, because it does not pull directly from New York State taxes. You'll have to manually enter that. If anyone in the room had pension income that was reported on the New York State taxes for 2024, they'll ask you questions regarding that. But the biggest question they're going to ask was, what was your New York State taxable income for 2024? The New York State Excelsior Scholarship. Now this is only applied to SUNY or CUNY schools, but if you're applying to private schools, some private schools do have their own version of the Excelsior Scholarship. You'll want to reach out to those schools to ask to see if there's any state-based aid at those schools. So the New York State Excelsior Scholarship allows a student to attend a state-operated SUNY or CUNY school tuition-free. Now that does not include fees, housing, or food. That's important to remember. It only covers tuition. And it's a last paying in dollar scholarship, meaning it covers up to the cost of tuition after all other federal and state grants are applied. So say you receive over the $7,070, which is SUNY costs, you most likely will not be eligible for Excelsior. But if that federal Pell Grant New York State TAP does not add up to that $7,070, that's where Excelsior can come in and help get it to that $7,070 worth of aid. So the eligibility for that is the federal adjusted gross income must be $125,000 or less. There are some requirements while the student is in school. They have to complete at least 12 credits per semester or 30 per year. I know that math doesn't add up because there's only usually 2 semesters in a year, so a lot of our students will take 15 credits a semester. And you have to agree to live in New York State after graduation for the amount of years that you receive Excelsior. So if you receive Excelsior for 4 years, you are committing to live in New York State for 4 years. If you do not live in New York State after graduation for those 4 years, that Excelsior scholarship will turn into an unsubsidized loan, meaning you'll have to pay it back. So the application for Excelsior does not open usually until the spring. With that being said, though, you are required to complete the FAFSA and TAP application first. There is an area on the website, on the HESC website, where you'll be able to sign up for either an email or text notification when the Excelsior Scholarship becomes available. I highly recommend doing that, because it's always a random day that it'll become available. So you fill out the FAFSA, you fill out the tab, you're getting ready to fill out Excelsior. What now? Yes?
Sorry. Is this on 2024 taxes as well?
Yes, it'll ask you 2024 taxes. Once you fill out the FAFSA, you will get a notification once it's processed through the federal processor. And essentially it'll give you what the student aid report, which is also known as the SAR. It essentially will break down what your family contribution is, which can be a little confusing when you first read that through. That's okay. That's not going to be what that SAI is not what you're going to be awarded in aid. Essentially, that is just the federal formula that allows the institutions to see what you qualify for in federal aid. And when you get the processing results, most likely you'll receive an email. Making corrections. So as I talked about before, it's important to really take your time with it. But if you need to make corrections, you would go into the FAFSA. There is an option once it's submitted and processed for you to make a correction. Now, once you make that correction and submit it, all the schools listed on the FAFSA will receive that updated FAFSA, and they might ask for some additional information if there is a discrepancy between the first one and the second one. So it's important to know when you're making those corrections is that you might want to contact those institutions to make sure that there isn't anything else that needs to be completed. So what happens if there's a special circumstance that occurs? So it's pulling directly from the IRS, that 2024 income. Say there is a change of income, a loss of a loved one, unexpected medical expenses that come up currently, a divorce has occurred since 2024, anything like that, contact the school that you're applying to, because they will look through your FAFSA to see what can be done. For example, if they say there was a divorce, if the student only lives with one parent, we can take a look just to make sure that only the custodial parent's information is being used. So that can make a difference of what a student receives in financial aid. So I always say it doesn't hurt to ask. So something to keep in mind with this is that we'll have to first receive the original FAFSA before anything can be done. And the process is going to look different from school to school. So what we might request at SUNY Brockport might be different at an institution, might be different forms we have you fill out, different information that needs to be provided. So what to expect? As always, like I said, check your email. That's important, especially for our students, is that you really want to get used to, now that you're applying to all of these schools, really paying attention to that email that you're using. Also keeping that email consistent. I see a lot of students that use their high school email, but then later have to go and change it. So it might be smart to make an email specifically for applying to college, so then you have it, and then it's all in one place. If that's something that you can keep up with. Okay, so like I said, you'll receive information from the FAFSA. Now, when you receive a financial aid award, it's going to be different from school to school. You could always reach out to your school to see when you'll receive that. In the past at Brockport, we have had them choose students before that holiday break if you had it submitted well before that. You will then most likely get an estimated award letter from the schools to give you a general idea of what you're going to be awarded. One thing I did forget to mention for New York State TAP, that is not finalized until the award, until the budget is approved for New York State. Generally speaking, that happens in July. Happened a little bit earlier this year, but you might see at a lot of these schools that New York State TAP is going to be estimated, and it'll stay estimated until New York State approves their budget. So you'll have your award letter, and then what you're also, once you have your school, and you're definitely going there, you say yes, you accept those federal Stafford loans, there's going to be some additional requirements, and your institutions will tell you this, but you will go in and sign some loan promissory notes. That is essentially your agreement with the Department of Education that you're going to be borrowing those loans and paying that money back, as well as entrance counseling. They make students, when you borrow Stafford loans for the first time and every 10 years after that, they have you go through what's called entrance counseling. That I always recommend if the parent's available, parents sit down with your students to look at that. So it's going to walk them through what a loan is, what repayment's going to look like, what interest is, and it'll have them estimate how much debt they're going to potentially be in depending on these schools. So some helpful web resources, studentaid.gov. That is the one where you're going to create your FSA ID and fill out the FAFSA, as well as hesc.ny.gov. That is where you fill out the New York State TAP and Excelsior Scholarship application. So this is our contact information. I also have my business card. Please feel free to contact us. Luckily for you all, we're right behind you. We are open 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. You can walk in at any point, even if you're not coming to SUNY Brockport. And we can help you fill out the FAFSA and answer any questions you might have. If they are school specific, we won't be able to answer them. But if you need assistance filling out the FAFSA or TAP application, please come into our office. We'd be so happy to help you. And all of our information is on our website, which is brockport.edu/finaid. You will see on most, if not every college's website, they're going to list their cost of attendance. That might be something to start looking at, just to see the different costs, as well as like different scholarships that they offer, things like that. So I know I have a lot of information in a short period of time. Are there any questions? Yes.
Does it matter whose tax return the student is on? Does the parent who applies for it, does it have to be the same parent that if they're on their, I don't know, the IRS form or whatever?
It does not have to be the same, no. Any other questions? Yes.
When should we apply for the financial assistance?
I would say to get it done and out of the way so you're not worrying about it near the holidays. Like I said, we prefer to get it by January 1st. So I would just recommend just getting it done as soon as possible.
Do you do it after that you submit an application to the school?
Yes, so that is a great question. The question was, do I do it after I submit an application to the school? With it being said, you can submit it before because you can list up to 20 schools on the FAFSA. Generally speaking, we will not review a student's FAFSA until they're accepted at Brockport. And that's only speaking for our institution. Might be different at other schools, but I believe generally speaking, they wait till a student's accepted to get a better idea of what the aid would be. Any other questions? Well, thank you all for coming out this evening. Like I said, I do have business cards up here if you would like one. If not, all of our information is online. And please do not hesitate to reach out if you have any questions.